Hey, I'm Billy, the Burning Anchor, and welcome to Anchor Down. Unlike other game reviews, I'm not here to give out grades. I don't consider myself a teacher by any means, just a gamer who knows what he likes. I'm here to discuss what I enjoyed, what didn't quite land, and whether or not I'd recommend a wandering gamer if I'd recommend it. So let's anchor down and dive right in. Dragon Age the Veilguard is the fourth major title in the Dragon Age series, following Dragon Age 1, 2, and Inquisition. Developed by BioWare and published by Electronic Arts, the game continues and finishes the plotlines and stories seen in Inquisition, and similar to the other games in the series, has world-level events changed by decisions made in previous titles. The game was released on October 31st, 2024 for PC, PlayStation 5, and Xbox Series X and S. The standard edition is $59.99 and the deluxe edition is $79.99 USD. For all platforms, a deluxe upgrade-like DLC can be purchased for a total of $20 USD. The deluxe edition only includes multiple cosmetic weapons and armor sets for the player character and the NPC companions. Regional pricing is not available for this title and may be at a higher price for players from different regions such as Canada and LATAM. This fourth main entry began development in 2015, just a few months after the release of Dragon Age Inquisition. However, challenges from other games under the BioWare helm, specifically Mass Effect Andromeda and Anthem, had the game put on hold in 2016 before officially getting cancelled in 2017, which led to multiple staff leaving the company. The most prominent of this being Mike Laidlaw, the previous creative director behind the project, who is also known for his work as the lead designer behind Dragon Age Origins, Dragon Age 2, and the director behind Dragon Age Inquisition. In 2018, development restarted. Mark Dara remained as executive producer and Matthew Goldman took the creative director position. Originally, the game included live service components such as multiplayer and microtransactions intended for a long-term gameplay loop and long-tail revenue until they were finally scrapped in a decision based on the success of the fully single-player game Star Wars Jedi Fallen Order and the disappointing returns of Anthem, the very game the live service components were based on. We jump to 2020. 2 years later, Mark Darr has resigned from BioWare and left the project under their third and final executive producer, Christian Daly, who would then leave the company in 2022, leaving the game without a fully officially credited executive producer. In 2023, Mark Darr would return as a consultant for the game, and shortly after, a wave of layoffs would hit BioWare yet again, including Mary Kirby, credited as creating multiple key figures within the Dragon Age universe, leaving the development team much different than it did in 2015, let alone when the original Dragon Age games were being made. Finally, the game was released in October 2024, nearly 10 years after the original plans were put together for the next installment in the Dragon Age series. January 2025 marked the final days of active development aside from bug fixes, and BioWare as a whole saw a company-wide restructuring, which would see the release of many employees that were on the Veilguard team. Dragon Age the Veilguard is a perfect example of why I feel the context behind the release of a game is so important. Just looking at the timeline behind the managers and the teams themselves is a complete mess of layoffs, leaving in misdirection, and it's rather easy to see how that affected the actual core gameplay of the title. While Veilguard is set as the fourth mainline game in the Dragon Age series, it deviates heavily from the standard and plays much more similarly to how Mass Effect Andromeda does to the other Mass Effect games. Instead of the traditional four-person party with the main character and 3 selected NPC companions, you're limited to just 2. While a typical 3 classes still exist in Warrior, Mage, and Rogue, an entirely new skill tree system is introduced that allows you to specialize in one subclass, but also pick abilities or traits from others. Combat itself is much more fluid, similar to Inquisition, but much faster paced as you can no longer take control of your NPC companions. You can still pause mid-combat, but your companions can only have 3 of their 5 skills learned be equipped, and then are directed by you on specific enemies. A big benefit I found in regards to combat is that every class can access ranged and melee weaponry. While there are negatives and benefits, the changes from the standard Dragon Age experience should be noted. The world itself is also rather different. Taking Inquisition as a baseline, you still have a hub world, the Lighthouse, which serves like Skyhold or the Keep, and is a resting place for yourself and your companions. Here, you can have dialogue and interact with the companions, but instead of ever having a back and forth conversation, they just talk at you until you walk away. You can initiate cutscenes, but those are marked by not allowing you to walk into the same room without hitting a button to start it. Even walking up to 2 or more companions being engaged in a conversation feels weird. You're just walking up to them as they talk about stuff, and in most cases aren't even acknowledged. From the lighthouse, you can access the crossroads, the in-game magical solution to have you quickly travel through every hotspot around the continent to solve the different problems. It just so happens we got lucky enough that every single place has one of these magical doors that connects to you, but it is what it is. Something unique to Veilguard is how it handles equipment. The slotting is the standard in regards to armor and weapons, and even the option to set a casual pair of clothes when exploring the lighthouse. But instead of the normal amount of uncommon, rare, legendary, and unique tiers of items that could be found in chests or from fallen enemies, there are a set amount of items that exist in the world and increase in rarity and gain additional effects when you obtain multiple of the same item, as if it were a gacha game. The game handles itself pretty well, reducing a lot of the clunkiness of movement found in Inquisition, and can be played with either a mouse and keyboard or a controller. The game is also fully compatible on the Steam Deck. If you're a die-hard Dragon Age fan, you'll find the long-awaited end to the Dreadwolf storyline here. However, unlike previous entries, your choices in earlier titles have little to no real impact on the story or the state of the world, which is a major departure from what fans have come to expect from BioWare's signature style, where your previous character's legacy and choices held serious narrative consequences. For newcomers, the Veilguard is a surprisingly digestible entry point. There's a ton of lore and world-building content scattered throughout the cutscenes and in-world content that will allow new players to catch up on key concepts and histories. That said, veteran players may be rather frustrated by how watered down the player's choice ethos has become. Companions have also been the heart beating at the center of BioWare's storytelling, and you'll find yourself with quite the crew in Veilguard. Each character has their overarching storyline that ranges from political intrigue within the cities you discover to deep personal stories, such as Tasha's journey navigating gender identity. These arcs are intended to be as meaningful and powerful as companions from previous titles, but the repetitive structure of identify an issue, dig a bit deeper, and then choose between two binary outcomes done 7 times over undercuts the emotional weight of the stories that are supposed to feel nuanced and extremely personal. In the newcomer Tasha's case especially, there is a disconnect between the narrative's push for identity exploration and the mechanically rigid resolution system. The repeated emphasis on Tasha's non-binary identity, especially in scenes with their traditionalist mother and upbringing being mentioned, feels undermined by the lack of narrative flexibility. It's hard to take the preaching fluidity and acceptance as anything more than just a checkmark of inclusion from the writers when every single arc ends in a rigid A or B choice. With their story, it felt proud to show characters learning how to accept their becoming non-binary, but strips it all away as it forces you to witness the finale of their growth be a binary option. Stepping out to the full crew, veterans will see a few familiar faces like Varric and Harding rejoining your party, but the mostly new members enter with a plethora of personality and uniqueness. However, a pervasive tone of softness hangs over both the characters and the main plot. The story often stresses that your character, Rook, must help others find mental clarity from their struggles so that they, in turn, can help you with the main plot. It's an optimistic message for sure, but one that saps urgency and takes from the narrative when the answer to every single obstacle within the main plot is, time to level up the power of friendship, maybe. In addition, the pacing of the companion quests and their integration into the central story feels awkward, making even likable characters seem oddly disconnected from how the main plot develops, because these are optional quests after all. Tonally, Veilguard tries to explore identity in a time of ideological upheaval. Your Rook is trying to figure out who they are, just as the world's religious and political systems begin to fracture. It's a very rich theme, but the execution is uneven. Each element, the combat, the story, the characters, the setting, can stand on its own, but the attempt to merge them together often feels disjointed. The combat is energetic and polished, yet the plot doesn't explain why we're finding the umpteenth wave of creatures with the same abilities as the last few again, outside of it's a video game. Character arcs that should deepen your investment in the world and how it's growing feels like checklist items just so you can get the desired ending or romantic relationship you want. Ultimately, Veilguard is a story about identity, ironically told through a game that never figures out its own. Veilguard sports myriad accessibility features within the settings. In general, the game offers the ability to reduce camera shake and options for multiple color vision deficiencies. Subtitle text is turned on by default and is adjustable in size just as the Y font is. Admittedly, visual clarity can be a problem in certain combat scenarios as there's a lot of color and flying projectiles on screen at once in late game fights. Thankfully, there are visual clarity settings and audio feedback options to help manage this. If you happen to be playing with a controller, vibration feedback can also be enabled. In terms of difficulty, it can be adjusted to incredibly easy for those that want to focus on witnessing the story, to the nightmare difficulty that requires both a very meticulous build of your character and the companions. If any of the presets aren't to your taste, a custom difficulty maker is also included to adjust specific settings. For those sensitive to it, or for those recording and streaming content, it is also possible to disable nudity. Altogether, it's clear that Veilguard makes a solid attempt to be playable and approachable for a wide range of players, even if a few moments of visual overload might still slip through. In total, I finished a near 100% completion run on normal difficulty in about 50 hours of gameplay, and to note, I do like reading things and taking my time. Finishing my 100% run, including collectibles and achievements, added an additional 10 hours, for a total of 60 in-game hours. At the time of writing, Dragon Age the Veilguard has over 36,000 reviews on Steam, with a 69% positivity for a mixed rating, a 3.5 star rating with over 3,800 reviews on the Xbox Store, and a 3.2 star rating with 37,000 reviews on the PlayStation Store. For my final verdict, Dragon Age the Veilguard is a do not buy. For a game about finding your identity, I find it ironically humorous that it seems to fluctuate between pandering towards long-term Dragon Age fans and trying to find a new footing in a modern era with modern audiences. Should this game not be attached to the series, I don't think I would enjoy it. And for the first time in a long while, completing the game with the choices that I wanted made it feel like a chore. There's some high points. The combat specifically was incredibly fun and involved, but after about 30 waves of the same fodder creeps just reskinned and respawned, it became repetitive. The game, similar to the team behind it, became an unrecognizable mess the further you make comparisons to the highlight games of the past of BioWare. However, if the game does look interesting to you, feel free to give it a try. As a die-hard Dragon Age fan, I really wanted to love this game, and I'm heartbroken that's not something I found possible. For the Dragon Age fans, this isn't something you really wanted, and for the new fans, this isn't the Dragon Age you should be introduced to. Thanks for watching. I'm Billy, the Burning Anchor, and I hope you enjoyed this episode of Anchor Down. If Dragon Age the Veilguard piqued your interest, check the description for the links to see for yourself. I'll see you next time when we put our anchor down.